Hello everyone, how are my students? I'm Alka Chaturvedi, an educator, a trainer, and a friend of yours. Today I've come up with a chapter from class 10th, that is a poem, Fire and Ice by Robert Frost. Fire and ice. The words are very common and all of us know them. There's fire in my heart. I have a passion to do that. And it's as cold as ice. Mind you, let's move ahead. Before we start with the poem, let's uh, study a bit about Robert Frost. Robert Frost was born on March 26, 1874, at San Francisco, California, United States. He died on January 29, 1963. He was a poet and a playwright. Most of his works are based on his life experiences. I would love to start with a very famous quote of his. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. In class ninth also, you people had done a poetry by Robert Frost, that is The Road Not Taken. Two roads diverged into the woods. Remember that poem? Right. Moving ahead, this short poem, it's only of two stanzas, Fire and Ice. It outlines the familiar question about the fate of the world, wondering how this world is going to end up. Whether it is going to end up in fire or whether it's going to end up in ice. Now let's look at the three words, fire, ice, and the world. Fire, it denotes the passion, the arrogance, the enthusiasm, the envy, the hot nature of a person, and even anger and death. Whereas on the other hand, ice shows sadness, insensibility, contempt, fear, pitilessness, ugliness, cold are words related to ice. And this world has its own physical boundaries, spiritual mentality. People in the world have their own public and private relations, and so on. So, how the poet connects the three, let's have a look into it. Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From that, what I have tasted of my desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice. So these are the two stanzas of this poetry, and let's see what he has to say further. Fire and Ice, it's a compact poem. You know what compact is? The poet talks about the fate of the world in this poetry. It expresses the profound idea that the world would end either of the two ways, either in fire or in ice. Finally, fire and ice both result with self-destruction of the human emotions, hatred and the desire. The poet calls these as fiery desires, and he wants us to be aware of them. Therefore, if the earth was to end up twice, he says, ice would also suffice. Initially, he stands with the people who say that the world is going to end in fire. But later on, he says, if the world has to end up twice, even ice would suffice. The poet wants to tell us, he wants us to know that the fire describes the passion which is hot and hasty, and ice describes the rationals, which is cool and deliberate. By using these figurative languages like symbolism, we know we must read the poetry repeatedly to have a deeper understanding of it. So, moving ahead, let's look into the major themes that are there in this poetry. Hatred and the power of emotion is a major theme of this poetry. The poet discusses of the destructive features of human emotions. He uses the symbols of fire and ice to show the desires and the hatred that contributes to the making of the world. These powerful emotions will eventually drag the world into a catastrophic end. Now let's analyze the literary devices in this poetry. The first literary device that is used is assonance. Now what is assonance? Assonance is the repetition of the vowel sounds in the same line, such as the long sounds of O in I hold with those who favor fire. A repetition of the O sound signifies this literary device. Next literary device is alliteration. You all are well aware about what alliteration is. Alliteration is the repetition of the consonant sounds in the same line, such as the sounds of F in I hold with those who favor fire. The consonant F has been repeated in favor fire. The next device is imagery. Imagery is used to make the readers perceive the things involving their five senses. Some say the world will end in fire. And to say that for destruction, ice is also great. Just to create an image into the minds of these readers. The next is the use of symbolism in this poetry. Symbolism is the use of the symbols to signify the ideas and the qualities by giving them a symbolic meaning which is different from the literal meaning. Fire is a symbol of desire and ice is a symbol of hatred. Similarly, green and gold are symbols of beauty and happiness. So the poet has used symbolism in this poetry. Then we have anaphora. Anaphora is the repetition of a word or expression in the first part of some verses. Some say the world will end in fire and some say the world in ice. So the repetition of some say in both the lines, the same starting, that signifies the literary device anaphora. Moving ahead, we have personification. Personification is giving the human quality to inanimate objects. In this poem, fire and ice are capable of destruction. Therefore, the poet has personified fire and ice by giving them a mind which is capable of destroying almost anything and everything. The last figure of speech that's used is enjambment. Enjambment is when a thought or a clause that does not come to an end at the line break and it runs into the next line. That figure of speech is known as enchantment. Now look at these lines. From what I have tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. One line running into the next line is enchantment. I hope I've made you people clear with the figures of speech, the literary devices that have been used in this poetry. Now it's time to listen. Lend me your ears, dear students. Are we ready? And we are going to revise here.
Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to do the poetry Fire and Ice by Robert Frost. Fire and Ice is a short poem consisting of two stanzas dealing with the two possibilities of destruction of the world. The two different stanzas deal with two different schools of thought about the destruction of the world, one with fire and the other with ice. However, the poet has used two elements both literally and symbolically. The poem presents two contradictory views about how the world would see its end. The idea is based on the scientific theories that the world will come to its doom either because of excessive fiery heat or because of the freezing ice. Some scientists are of the view that the world would be scorched because of the global warming, while others hold an entirely contradictory view that it would be frozen to its end in an ice age in the future. The poet subscribes to the first view that it would end in fire, but he uses fire and ice symbolically, associating each with a different emotion. Fire is used as a symbol of violent, fiery passions like anger, cruelty, brutality, etc. The poet is of the opinion that human beings are so much overpowered by these destructive passions that they may cause the end of the world. These emotions, in their intensity, have the potential to consume the world. Similarly, ice has a symbolic significance in the poem and represents the cold feelings like hatred, indifference, jealousy, apathy, self-centeredness, etc. The poet, who finds violent passions to be a potent threat to the existence of the world, is not blind to the rampant cold emotions. People have lost the warmth of human affection, kindness, and sympathy. The icy feelings of selfishness and self-centeredness have suppressed the human values and have so strongly overpowered the human beings that they are potent dangers to the world. They may spell the doom of the world because they are sufficiently destructive forces. Thus, the poet does not rule out the probability of ice being a potential delay force which can annihilate the world completely. While fire consumes the world quickly, ice is like a slow poison to lead the world gradually to its end. Let's talk about the title, Fire and Ice. The title Fire and Ice is short, crisp and meaningful. It contains in itself the whole gist of the poem. Fire and ice are used symbolically for two contrary sets of emotions. Robert Frost shows the prevalence of fiery passion like fury, cruelty, violence and greed, as well as the cold feelings like hatred, indifference and insensitivity. Fire and ice, though contrary in nature, have similar ability to destroy. Now let's talk about the theme. Robert Frost's Fire and Ice is based on the idea that the world is likely to encounter two different destructive forces, fire and ice, either of which will spell its end because of its intensity. The poet uses fire and ice as literal as well as symbolic levels. Literally, the world may move gradually towards excessive global warming or towards excessive coldness, which will bring about its doom. Symbolically, fire and ice represent contrasting emotions, fire symbolizing violent passions like anger, cruelty, brutality, and ice signifying hatred, jealousy, insensitivity, indifference, etc. Both the fiery and the cold emotions in their intensity can prove to be the cause of destruction of the world, since they suppress human values and alienate the people from one another. The poet tries to give us a message that if human emotions of anger, lust, jealousy, greed, hatred, and indifference keep rising, the world will sooner or later move towards a total destruction. Both in the fiery and cold temperaments have the power to destroy the world, and such temperaments must be controlled for the world to survive. The poet indirectly emphasizes the need of sustaining human thoughts and feelings for the survival of the world. The poem contains a warning for mankind to be alert and aware of the dangers in letting loose any such emotions. Now let's talk about the literary devices that are used in this poem. The first literary device.
Thank you.